Okay, so I will take the floor. So Peter, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present you today our skill expander, and I'm really glad and big thanks to AmCham and all the staff for organizing today's event. So my name is Martin Šikula. I'm the advisory partner at PwC in Slovakia. And today also our Luxembourg colleagues will join this session. Peter did not mention Christian Scharf and Claire Young, who also attended this meeting. Christian Scharf is partner at PwC in Luxembourg, who is, I think, globally leading this initiative and the skill expander solution. So our ambition today is to briefly inform you about the results that of our study on digital skill assessment in Slovakia we delivered for the European Commission and government of Slovakia in 2019. And then I think Ivan Hampel will say a few words. I hope not more than 10 minutes. And then Virginia and Christian, who work with us also intensively on this project, will show you the upskilling platform they developed recently. It is an advanced technology or AI-based solution for upskilling of your workforce. So I would like to be time effective, so I will jump to the first slide. I hope that Ivan will manage the presentation. If something is out, just stop me, raise your hand. I don't know how it works here, but I'll put a comment in the chat. So, okay, the next slide. Yeah, this one is a colorful, like a colorful metrics slide when you can see some collected data from relevant studies and sources like World Economic Forum, the OECD, World Bank, European Commission. So you can see some challenging data here, some maybe with a negative connotation or not a shocking connotation, but you see that there is a urgent need of actions that must be taken. I think that the key message here is that around 30% of jobs are at high risk and should be displaced in coming 10 years. I think you see a lot of articles in newspapers that are like predicting this. Only 30% of employees are nowadays which are at risk of job displacement from I don't know, technological changes. They received training in the past year, and most of the jobs that are at risk are often the ones who are least likely to receive any retraining at all. So. Also, we as a consulting company, we do not only give you advice on what to do and how to do, but we started already internally our global initiative that was launched in last year in September 2019. And we decided to invest around $3 billion globally into upskilling or job training of our employees over the next 3 or 4 years. It means it is approximately €4,000 per employee yearly, which means, as we calculated from our study, it's more than 6 times more than average Slovak company will invest in the same period. We see that the speed of technological change requires an urgent and global upskilling effort. So we also found out some articles of data from the World Economic Forum on World Bank that almost more than half of the employees will have to upskill or and reskill considerably by 2022. So not so much time. Not only that these technology changes and globalization are two major megatrends, or how to call them, but also unexpectedly the COVID and this pandemic crisis, which brings unpredictable changes in the future demand, will impact future workforce. So we see that the creating of a reskilling revolution will require investment, a huge one, and on a company level, on the national level, on the EU or global level. Yeah. For example, we see in some statistics from United States that indicates 1 year ago that nearly 1.4 million US workers who could lose their jobs over the next decade due to technological change, and will cost the country more than 34 billions of US dollars. Yeah. And we see that like the private sector could only reskill and, let's say, profitably reskill about 25% of those workers. And its businesses work together, like, let's say, this community of the business association, when they join forces, that they can collectively reskill almost half of the jobs or employees or at-risk workers. Yeah, and we need definitely government also, because we see that the impact of this crisis is quite, or will be quite, not dramatic but huge. If government joined this effort, they could reskill more than 75% of all at-risk workers. Yeah, and there is some still like benefiting from returns on investments and lower social costs, including unemployment compensation and so on. So maybe there will be some like wrap up or from my side, or I would like to point out some major thoughts now that the industry revolution 4.0 is ongoing. Yeah, it's like IoT enabled smart factories, smart technologies, cognitive computing, and the biggest technology change for our industry. And we are now talking about the industry 5.0, which will increase the collaboration between human and robots, and hopefully will inspire more creative thinking of humans. And this industry 5.0 is ahead of us. Yeah, so we need to adopt, we need to change, and the digital transformation is a must. Yeah. Second, I think that the COVID and the post-COVID era only accelerate the extent of robotization and automation. Or in some cases, we already see that it can cause a complete change of business models and transformation of some companies. You see in recent months that the e-shops were extremely successful during this lockdown period. So who was prepared for some to jump to the online platform was really successful in last month. So there is still a strong pressure on this effectiveness and cost optimization. I'm not using the negative word reduction, but cost optimization. And we see that some jobs are at risk, yeah, definitely. Not only from statistics, that you see that also I internally see that our consultants will need to change somehow to receive more technological skills, to be more like data focused, to be data scientists or data engineers. So some jobs will not exist in the future. Some jobs we do not know today will appear. So we need to involve government into this process. And we have to also behave responsibly and take care of people that will be at risk, because still we are humans. Yeah. So that's maybe some short wrap up from my side or in introduction words to you. I will now let Ivan Hampel, who is our senior consultant, who was really working on this digital skills assessment project, to present you briefly some data we collected during our work for European Commission. And then also the important part of the session, the skill expander presentation, will be, I think, presented with nice lady from Luxembourg, Virginie, with support of Christian Scharf. So thank you for your attention. Stay tuned. Ivan, board is yours. I hope you will enjoy it, and thank you very much. Also remotely from this office.
Okay, perfect, Martin, and thank you. Thank you for the introduction. As Martin told, my name is Ivan Hampel and I work with PwC in Martin's team. And quite recently, we looked at the availability of crucial skills in Slovakia in digital transformation era. We successfully delivered a project for the Deputy Prime Minister of Slovakia, but the project was directly managed by the European Commission, as it was the European Commission who actually supported this initiative of the Deputy Prime Minister. During our project, we assessed availability of the crucial skills in the digital era. When we talk about the skills in digital era, it is not about digital skills only. We believe digital transformation requires a good combination of different skills. Therefore, during our project, we looked at 3 different groups of skills. The first one is obviously digital skills. Digital skills are general skills required for daily lives with the use of digital products and services. But we also look at technological skills, which are professional skills needed for job performance with the use of the new technologies companies invest in. And last but definitely not least, we also assessed availability of social skills in Slovakia. With the rapid development of new technologies, ability to adapt becomes more important than ever. Therefore, skills such as collaboration, communication, and learning new technologies is more important than ever. In order to come up with realistic findings and recommendations, we surveyed approximately 400 Slovak SMEs and 10 big corporations. We looked at the results in more detail with the use of focus groups in all Slovak major regions. And we also look for the good European practices in countries we considered as the European digital leaders. For example, Sweden, Finland, Luxembourg, Ireland. Okay, so what did we find out? In a nutshell, we might say that Slovak firms believe digital transformation is an opportunity and already invest into new technologies. Looking at the results from our survey, almost 76% of business owners in Slovakia believe robotization and automation will help their businesses. As I pointed out earlier, new technologies require new skills, which are an integral part of the transformation. Without the appropriate skills, this investment cannot be utilized. The skill situation in Slovakia is alarming. We found out that almost 75% of companies struggle to hire an actual employee with required skills. So let's look at the availability of these different skills in more detail. When we look at digital skills, we notice that our business owners in Slovakia overestimates the level of digital skills among its workforce. According to the official European statistic from Eurostat, people in Slovakia in general have similar level of digital skills they use in everyday life than the European average. However, our business leaders in Slovakia believe we had a similar availability like these digital leaders I was talking about. And that results in 18% more people than the actual European estimates. So there is this big disproportion of what business owners think they can operate with and what there actually is. When we look to professional technological specific skills, Slovak businesses find it very difficult to find the right talent. According to our survey, 85% companies struggled to find an appropriate technology people for their job openings. We can also see that professional services or technology companies such as yours face similar threat. Yet, if companies find some prospective talent, They all have to face common problems such as high salary expectations. On top of that, companies from Central and East Slovakia must also face with weak workforce mobility, as people do not really want to come working to these regions. The problem with this availability of technological skills is probably systematic. When we look again at the official European numbers, we found out that Slovak schools produce approximately 15 or 16 technological experts per 1,000 citizens, which is 18% less than the European average, which is 19, slightly more than 19 technological experts per 1,000 citizens. So we definitely believe this is a problem which is not a problem of companies itself or people itself. It's also a problem and a challenge which must be solved in the cooperation with the national government. When we talk about digital transformation and the skills required for thriving, as I was saying earlier, we can often hear adaptability to new skills is even more important than the actual technological or digital skills. With the rapid development of technology, there always will be a constant demand for the new skills. So there is this genuine demand for ability to learn. This is why we looked at the social skills and their availability in Slovakia. Unfortunately, we face similar problems like with the technological skills. 74% of companies had problems to find a person with required social skills. This is a widespread problem across the whole country and industries. Similarly, as the number of people with the required skills is limited, this puts pressure on salary costs of companies. In addition, people are again reluctant for mobility within central and eastern part of Slovakia. So, as we can see, the Slovak companies have really struggles to find an available talent they need, and therefore they must focus on development of their existing workforce. This will become even more evident in the near future as the Slovak population is getting older. In our survey, which was quite positive for us, is that almost 43% of business representatives told us that they have human capital development plan and know what skills they will need in the coming years. In average, they invest approximately 730 euros a year per employee into trainings. Moreover, as we can see, 64% of the companies in Slovakia provide training opportunities to their employees. Unfortunately, only 45% of people in Slovakia are open to participate in any non-formal training. So I believe the goal is clear. Slovak businesses need to motivate their employees and enable them preferred ways for their further professional development. We believe this goal can be achieved with the use of upskilling, a platform designed by our Luxembourg colleagues and tailored for the Slovak needs as a recommendation for the project we delivered to the Prime Minister. Now I will give the word to Christian and Virginie, our Luxembourg colleague, who work with us, and they will guide you through the whole upskilling process and platform so that you can see how it helps to advance our businesses and society. So Virginie, you might take over. Thank you.
Yeah, actually it's Christian taking over. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for invitation, Peter, and thank you, Ivan and Martin, for the kind introduction. My name is Christian Scharf. I'm a partner in PwC Luxembourg. I'm a former HR director. I've been doing this for more than 20 years before being at PwC. And I'm involved in this upskilling journey for the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years. The whole story started with EU, where we were producing white books showing that, something like 700 IT people would be missing by 2025. When you saw those kind of figures, they were produced by our teams in Luxembourg on behalf of the Commission. And we had also the pleasure to introduce those kind of topics to the rotating presidency of the EU every 6 months. And every 6 months, we were looking at new people that were doing a few stuff. I mean, they were kind of also asking questions with regards to this topic. So yeah, that was quite an interesting journey. And after a while, basically, we decided with my colleague Laurent that we should invest much more, because from theoretical issue, it became a very pragmatic issue. We were getting into 4.0, like you've been saying. We were getting into the very big wave of digitization. And so we decided to move much more into the topic. We even decided to be something very different, because we decided to write a book on the topic. So we wrote a book that you can see here called Upskill, which was, I think, the first of the kind. Now, if you go on Amazon, you might find 4 or 5 with the same title now. It means that we were a little bit in advance in our time. And we developed the solution you're going to see in a minute. But before going there, I'd like maybe to ask you a few questions. And I think, Virginie, you can drive us through a WooClap.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Christian. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be with you today. Together with Claire, who is also working with us on the team and that you can see here. So the one speaking have the camera on, but we would like to invite you actually to a small digital roundtable before we go into the discussion. So don't worry, it will not be, lengthy. Everyone presents and introduces himself, but we thought it might be much easier and also with more fun to exchange on the topic with all the people around the virtual table, let's say. So we suggest that everyone on the call connects to the website that you can see here on the screen. So WooClap, so www.wooclap.com/AmCham, and drop us just a note in the chat, maybe when you are there and ready to go. You can also just, Peter, thanks a lot. You can also just click on the link from the chat. And what we will do now is actually to go with you through 3 questions, just to trigger a bit of interaction and to be able also to discuss with you. So do not hesitate to unmute yourself if you want to share thoughts. And once we have a bit of interaction in the chat telling us that you are there and ready to go, we will then start the questions. So no reaction on the chat yet. Do I have to interpret it that no one can enter actually the website, or that you're all in there and ready to start? Can we see, Claire, actually how many people have already logged in? Yeah, so I can see we have 1 person. So it's Christian. Okay, Peter and Christian are ready. What about the others? If I take just names, I see Denisa there, Andre, who is also a colleague from PwC. I would just shout out loud to Eva, Katarina, Martina. Are you also ready? Yeah, I can see some action, so that's great. Thank you. So indeed, the first question is, in which area your company is currently investing for the aim of transformation? And we can see from the, so I have to put myself somewhere else. I see myself, but not the responses. I can see, yeah, that we do see a lot around digital transformation. Digitalization. We do see also, I saw remote before. Yes, I do see one around remote. I guess this is mainly also, let's say, COVID related. So we have now 23 people in there, 24, still growing. So let's wait for the latecomers. I see also, and that's interesting because it comes back also to one of the topics that Ivan addressed before. I see also other topics that are not digital transformation related. So for instance, digital leadership capabilities. That's an interesting point because this is also what we see and experience in various client projects that, you know, it's upskilling for a digital world, but it doesn't mean that it's all digital skills related, and that we actually also need to think about, you know, when we say industry 4.0, everyone looks at technologies, but in the end, it's still humans working together. So it means also that we do see that more and more soft skills, you know, related topics come up and are very crucial and also instrumental to the success of people on their job. So, okay, great. I see that, I would be interested indeed to have maybe, I don't know if it's one question, one person or more, but that did also put in their future skills. If the person who put that would like just to elaborate on that, and what does it mean, future skills for you? It's anonymous, so I don't know who wrote that. So whoever wants to take it up, maybe. Future skills, anyone wants to share about that? No? Still too shy? Okay.
Still too shy. Yep.
Yes, still too shy, it seems. So I guess that's future skills, or I hope, and react please if I'm mistaken. I think that we can wrap up into future skills exactly what we were saying before. So digital skills indeed, and in combination with soft skills, or at least, you know, everything that is related to what we hear a lot these days. So learning agility, collaboration skills, communication skills, and as we saw also before, leadership capabilities, which play a role, definitely.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was unmuted. Yeah, Martina Szusterova speaking. I put this topic there because currently we are running within our organization this project, which is focusing on the definition and the definition of the future skills for the specific business. So we are dealing in the ICT environment, and we try to define the skills which will be needed when it comes to the service catalog, to the future products and the services we would like to offer. So currently we would like to focus on investing on development towards these skills. So generally we are talking about the cloud, about architecture, DevOps, as well as agility, and the leadership was also mentioned here. So
okay, yeah. Thanks a lot, Martina. So it goes into, so I was, I guess, then guessing in the right direction. So thanks a lot for this. So I think this gives us a good picture and overview of also the impacts of digital and investment, and how much it is important to, you know, have this kind of projects like Martina was saying, transforming into, you know, the impacts on the workforce, and make sure that the workforce, you know, is going in the right direction also in terms of skills development and capabilities in that sense. So maybe we can move to the second question that we wanted to ask you, which is now here. As a consequence, which jobs are going to be the most impacted in the next 1 to 3 years in your organizations? Feel free to start voting. Transactional. The ones with the less complexity, that's interesting. Accountants. I guess it means the one with the less complexities based on automation of tasks, I guess, and the jobs that have repetitive tasks. This is what we see elsewhere very frequently. Generalists, we see a lot here also. Yeah, back office jobs, administration. I think we have a lot, as we discussed also with Peter, we have a lot of people coming also from the shared services centers business in the virtual room. So it explains also what we do see here.
Yes, actually, Virginie, I can confirm that most of our attendees come from shared service companies located across the country, especially Bratislava and Košice.
Which then makes sense, obviously, of what we see. And I guess this is also, you know, it's interesting to see, you know, sometimes companies and people think, you know, my job is my job X, Y, Z will be impacted, and how will I do that? But as you can see here, and we can see it also, you know, with the size of the words, we can see, you know, that some are coming back. So if we take, or if we put some together, so less complexity, the repetitive tasks, we see that this is going across the bar, isn't it? So it means also that we can see that, you know, it's not in one company, one type of job that is impacted, but it's actually across the board that we see jobs impacted, and often admin related, or indeed back office jobs, or the first ones that we think of. And it's interesting then to see also what is then the opportunity for these jobs and for the people sitting on these jobs to find their future position. And this is what we will be talking through to in the next, let's say, half an hour. Maybe we can go to the last question, Claire. And this is an interesting topic also, is how is COVID actually impacting this digital transformation? So we would be happy to hear also from your perspective how you feel about this. So maybe it's a bit of a subjective question. I can relate to that. I'll leave you finishing answering. As we have still 21 people connected on the 11 that participated. One or two more want to participate. I think we do see here a tendency, you know, towards, of course, that COVID and everything that was related to it, meaning also remote working. And as you can see, most of us are still, you know, even though some are in the office, like Martin said before, and then in PwC premises, we can see, and I'm quite sure that many of you also are still sitting in their office, but in their private office or in their kitchen or wherever, working remotely. And that definitely COVID for this has had, or is having still, an impact on the speed of adoption also of technology, be it just the one that we are experiencing now, so talking through virtual meetings, but maybe also, you know, having access to documents remotely, digital signature, and everything that is related to that, to make sure that, you know, we can still keep on working, and we will touch upon this also in a minute, okay, I think this was very interesting, and despite the fact that not everyone, of course, can speak for 10 minutes, otherwise we will still be sitting here in the middle of the night. I really appreciate and thank you for this digital roundtable, so which gives us a bit, you know, that a feeling also that also in Slovakia you do face, you know, the same challenges as everywhere. And that we do believe strongly that upskilling is one of the answers to all of these challenges. And maybe I give you back the floor, Christian, to explain a bit where we're coming from at PwC Luxembourg, and what was, or what is our story based on what you started already talking us through.
Thank you, Virginie. Maybe we can come back to the slides. So
I will. in a minute.
When we when we went out of these discussions with a few ministers of labor doing this rotating presidency of EU, we engaged with our Minister of Labor at the time, Nicolas Schmidt in Luxembourg, and basically we had very very straightforward discussions about, Mr. Minister, you know, let's be a little bit direct. Why don't you stop being the Ministry of Unemployed People and start becoming the Minister of Labor, of people working? Which was kind of a provocation, of course. And so we asked why. Well, why? Because we believe, we consultants, you know, the guys who always tell you what to do, we believe that first, you're going to end up having many more people at unemployment office you're going to have to take care and pay. And that is going to cost you a fortune if you do nothing. He looked at us saying, you know what, prove it. Say, okay, well, you know, we have two steps to prove this. The first step is maybe to go for understanding whether companies are going to transform, change, and if jobs are really going to be put at stake. Well, you've been giving some very positive answer a minute ago, but bear in mind that was 3.5 years ago. So the word was a little bit different 3.5 years ago. So we went to CEO, like our colleagues in Slovak Republic did, and we asked basically 3 questions. The first one was, are you going for transformation? The second one was, did you forecast the impact of those transformation on your human capital? And third question is, when are you going to hit the wall? So when are you going to be really in jeopardy with your people? To the first questions, 90% plus, so 95% of companies obviously are transforming to a certain extent, but more dramatically. To the second question, same answer, 95%, but no, of course, they haven't looked at all into the consequences for human capital. And the last question, maximum 3 years. I'll remind you that was 3.5 years ago or even 4 years ago. So there was a business case. Then we went to another one, which was, hey, well, we know there is a business case, but does it make sense money-wise? So why should me, Minister of Labor, invest into upskilling people who are currently working in companies? This is company duty. This is not my problem. So we said, you know what? Let's look into the financials. And we made the financials about if we are looking for someone, we are kind of laying off, rehiring, blah, 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 and you know the story. Who's losing money and making money in that story? Well, actually, we could prove that if anyone is upskilling an individual, if €1 is spent in upskilling, there is at least €1 saved by the state and another euro saved by the company. So it's a 300% business case. And it's at least 200% each for the company and for the state. So if a company would do it for its own, they make money. If the state is doing it for its own, they make money. If they do both together, they both make money. So it's very clear that there is something to do there. Now there is one phenomenon which I need to make very clear here, is that not everybody will be upskilled at the same time. And this is about what you see here. Basically, what you're looking at when you look at upskilling, it's a very thin layer of employees who are going to be triggered by transformation every given year. When you look at your companies, the work is changing every year, bit by bit, progressively, and every year some people are triggered by transformation. I'm not talking about constant learning, which is a little bit about what's on the top end of the graph you see on the screen, which is basically about moving a little bit on the ladder on the training. It's really about acquiring new competencies, which is getting you into a new or a transformed function. And so basically, this is only for 8 to 12% of your people every single year. So every single year, if we want to cope with change at the speed it goes, we should invest heavily. And when I say heavily, it's kind of 3, 4, 5 weeks training in 10% of our people to bring up the ladder so that they could perform a heavily transformed position or a new position. And what does it take? It takes motivation, self-confidence, of course, the vision for the new function, this new set of competencies, good training, and to support the individual. Well, well, what I just did now is defining you what upskilling is about. It is not about giving the, year in, year out training we give to everybody. It's really focusing on a very thin tranche of the population and make sure those guys, they make the journey and they are still yet tomorrow. Why should we do this? Well, we should do this because we all experience, I think, that it's getting tougher and tougher to find the competencies we're looking into the market. So we experience that most employers have a very hard time to find people, certainly in specialized positions. And also because all those guys, they know you. They know your culture. They have their network. It's an asset, it's an intangible asset which is already there and which are making them much more performant. So basically, that's an additional reason which is not even compounded in the figure I was giving you beforehand to do it with those guys. Next slide. So what we did actually is really looking into this thing, and for the Luxembourgian state, but only working with private companies, we've been experimenting a process. And Virginie will explain you the process later on, so I will not deep dive into that, but we've been really kind of piloting this for almost 2 years in Luxembourg across all sectors: industrial, banking, services, SMEs, carpentry, printers, all kind of companies, just to understand whether it was working or not. And once we were there, we took the lessons, and I will come back in the lessons in a minute. And we've been reworking the platform again. We revamped it. We make a kind of a V2 of the platform, which is now available to the market, and which has been now, for instance, chosen by the state of Singapore to be their single platform for upskilling for the whole financial sector. So we're going to upskill tens of thousands of people in Singapore moving forward using this platform. And the platform was in competition with 11 other platforms and has been chosen as the platform for the country. And some of you might know how Singapore is picky with regards to skills, how difficult those guys are. So it's I think, one of the testimony of what we've been doing. Now, let's come back on the lessons learned. What did we learn when we were doing this exercise with companies? Well, the first thing we learned is that most are unequipped with regards to predicting the future of jobs in the company. So when we ask, do you know how the job will be evolving in the next 12 to 15 months? Usually the answer is no, or a very high level idea. Problem with that answer is that if you don't know what's going to happen 12 to 15 months down the road with your jobs, how can you organize the upskilling or the training of your employees? It's absolutely impossible. And by the way, why do we focus on 12, 15 months? We focus on 12, 15 months because we believe it's the only horizon we can manage in order to forecasting with precision what's going to happen with jobs. If I'm asking you what's going to happen with your jobs 5 years down the road, I suppose most of you will say, well, I just don't know, no idea, okay? It's way too far. We just don't even know which technology will be implemented because that technology might not even be invented yet. So it's impossible to forecast. 1 year, it's a good term. Why is it a good term? Because usually the budget are signed, the technical projects are decided, we are moving ahead with those projects, so we know what's going to happen 1 year down the road. And that's why we believe it's a good term. It's also a very good term because it's enabling companies who are getting into that journey first to analyze which going to be the jobs evolving in the future. And let's say it takes 2 to 3 months to do the exercise, okay? And then to engage with individuals that are going to be triggered by transformation and to try to understand what they should be doing tomorrow. That's going to take another 2 or 3 months. And that leaves another, I would say, 6, 7 months to organize the training. And believe me, 6, 7, 8 months to organize training for people when they need to take 20 or 25 days training is the absolute minimum. Because practically your company is still running, those guys are still working. You need to find a training to organize, to free them time. So 6, 7, 8 months is really what it takes to kind of make this happen out of our experience. So that's why we believe this 1-year term to forecast is a very good term. The second findings was about the training which were delivered. Actually, we like many people, offhand, you might have thought that the training delivered would be digital training. Actually, it's absolutely counterintuitive, but most of the training delivered were soft skills, hard skills, and to a very limited extent, digital skills. So the digital part was usually between 10–15% of the bulk training. The hard skills was about 30 to 50% of the training, and the soft skills was usually 40 to 50%, which perfectly makes sense. If you take a story like, I take one, a middle officer whose tool is changed to have a more efficient tool to interface with clients, well, obviously what's going to happen is that you're going to have the person need to understand how to engage with the client, how to tackle observation and argumentation. And so by definition, there is a lot of soft skills in there. There is also a lot of hard skills because she needs to know about the product. She needs to know, or he needs to know about some legal stuff. And there is a little bit about the product that's going to be implemented. So first, soft, second, hard, third, digital. And maybe a last one before giving the floor to Virginie on the demo is about, we found it extremely difficult for companies to determine their training plan. Actually, it's very hard for HR organizations, which are coping to stuff they've never been living, to a level of upskilling, which is not to give 2 or 3 days training, but more for a few weeks of training, to find the right setting in terms of training, which led us actually to develop another piece of the tool and of the platform to help companies to find the right training after the job matching. I'm going to stop here. And maybe I think after this those explanations, it's time for Virginie to get into a tool demo.
Yes, indeed. So I will just skip because I wanted Christian to not be disrupted by me. I will go through a few slides here that he addressed actually in the presentation, in speaking about what we did for Luxembourg, what we did very first. So that was at the beginning with the European Commission, what we did in Luxembourg, how we broke it down for Luxembourg. Maybe one piece here on the financial case also is just about how we did set it up very initially for the mechanism in Luxembourg. But I think one important aspect or message also that we wanted to convey is that the government and the ministry was the initiator of this program for the private sector. And this is a very important aspect to say that this is all about the ecosystem that you build. Also, when you put in place such an initiative, and about how public sector and private sector are engaging, side by side for the good of the employees, let's say in the end, and the good of competitiveness for the business. So that was just one point that I wanted to highlight. Of course, the learnings we also went through. And what is the outcome actually of this pilot that we had the chance to do in Luxembourg in 2018 and 2019 is the process that we developed for what we call now skills expander, in the sense of expanding the skills of the people. And this is a methodology on one hand that we developed based on our experience, and it goes through different steps. If I do it, let's say, very quickly for you to understand, it's not rocket science, but it's common sense. But most of the time, what we have seen is always the aha effect of people saying, "Oh yeah, actually it makes sense, and we never did it this way." So what we would usually do in such an end-to-end upskilling program would be first, to analyze and define the upskilling initiative. What are we talking about? So if we are in a company, what are the departments that are, in the scope of this transformation, and how does the transformation actually also impact the one department, but also the others. And what is the relationship between the business transformation strategy and the workforce strategy, and how to put them together. So this would be typically the very first discussions that one would have, you know, before just going into the very, you know, into the very operational topic. First, take a stack at where the company is standing, and also having a look at what is the strategy and how do we actually really translate this business strategy into the workforce strategy. The second step, of course, would then be to do this translation and to work on this translation. This is what we call define the future workforce. So it's taking into account technological and technology investments. You know, how do you translate that into your headcount, and specifically also into your skills portfolio? So if I make it short, the step 2 is actually to define your to-be vision in terms of, you know, workforce of the future. Really look at, okay, down the road, and what we do is actually not, so the key word in that is workforce planning. And workforce planning, you know, classically and traditionally was, you know, to say, okay, let's look down the road 10, 15 years. But today, you know, who can look 15 years down the road? We may not even know what technologies will be there 15 years down the road. So meaning that we need to be much more short-term oriented to be able to make the best out of the exercise. So we typically take, you know, a stack of 12 to 18 months down the road, because on one side, you know what you will be doing in 12 to 18 months. And then it also gives you a bit of certainty, even though we have seen also with COVID that, you know, from one day to the other, you may have to adapt anyways. But so this step 2 is about really defining the to-be situation in terms of workforce and capabilities. Once you have this to-be situation, of course, you want to know where you stand today, you know, against this to-be situation. So this would typically be step 3, where you actually also go in terms of level into let's say, level of individual. So it means also, you know, once you have defined your to-be situation, you know that you will need, you know, X accountants, maybe less, but for that, X data scientists more into your workforce. And then at step 3, you will go down and look at Daniela, you know, or John, who is an accountant, and typically also assess his or her current skills portfolio in terms of current status. So this is why the step 3 is also called assess current competencies of the impacted employees whose jobs are at risk being transformed, and have a look at the situation now. Well, once you have this, you know, as is picture and snapshots, you can then actually also compare it to your to-be situation that you have defined before, which means that you can then also match, you know, the to-be with the as-is and assess the gaps that you have in between. This is typically the core, actually, of the process, and what we have here as step 4, into finding the best possible match between the people, their current skills portfolio, but also the best job, future job. It can be also the same job, but different because of, you know, new competencies to be added. And once you have that, you also have the gaps so that you can also match towards trainings, meaning also target skills development for that person to better sit in the future job, and make sure that also you train the person, you know, with a target job in mind, and not for training, you know, training for training without further purpose. So this is a very important, very and critical aspect of the process, which is that we do not send people to trainings without a target job, thus also target skills in mind. And then, well, obviously we talk about upskilling, meaning acquiring new skills. So this is about the step 5, which is training the new competencies. So as you can see here, training is actually coming, you know, at the end of the chain. And this is a very important part in terms of upskilling that we take into account. The step 6 here that you see should actually be, you know, very transversal. throughout the initiative, because of course, when you start your initiative at step 1, you would also define KPIs, on how to best assess your return on investment or the progress also of the initiative. Thus, step 6 is actually about monitoring and evaluating the impact of your upskilling program throughout its rollout. So this is about, let's say, the methodology and process. And because we think that upskilling is one of the major issues that we will have to tackle already, and that we will have to tackle even more in the future, we also think that it needs to be tackled, at scale. And that one may need also, to push this exercise also to a specific volume. Which means that we also have developed a platform, and this is what Christian was talking before. And this platform is actually the translation of this methodology into underlying technologies, all AI driven, where we can actually, go through the specific process and the different steps that I have mentioned before. So I just want to stop here. If there is any question from the audience, or if everything's clear. If no reaction, I'll just go from the assumption that everyone is very clear with the process. Yes, okay. Peter, you wanted to react?
Just to confirm, that it seems like it's been clear for everybody. So far, we haven't received a question in the chat. I'm also happy to tease our participants not to be afraid to ask questions. Virginie, Christian, and Martin with Ivana will be happy to answer any of the questions you might have. So feel free to either use your hand. There is an opportunity to raise your hand in WebEx upon clicking on your name, or feel free to insert your question into chat function.
Yes, thanks, Peter. Indeed, because I'm presenting, I do not see the chat, so do not hesitate to interrupt or to put a question in the chat, and Peter will interrupt me then. So just here a quick remark before I go into just presenting you briefly various use cases that we do see with this platform, and showing you a sneak preview also of the platform. You see here actually the functional blueprint of this solution, and typically you would find back, in pink. If I go through them here, you would find, what I presented you before. So actually, the workforce planning is this definition of the to-be situation. The skills assessment is the definition and let's say, taking stock of what is my current portfolio in terms of skills and at the individual level. The matching is matching between what I will need in terms of future workforce and what I have today. So actually, where are the gaps and how can I cope and bridge them with training my people for these future jobs? And we have here a collaboration piece, which is actually what we would have seen before. So if I come back on the step 6, which is a layer in the platform for reporting and dashboarding, but also for cooperation between the different stakeholders that have an access to this platform. So what we really advocate for is actually to, take the opportunity of the technology to be able to support the human-centered process around upskilling. And what I will show you now in 2 minutes is actually a sneak preview of the platform. Just before that, to make it even clearer also that this platform is modular, and that it can be, that first you want to do a workforce planning to make sure that you have the real picture of your to-be situation and that you are prepared, towards your future. But maybe also you have already done the workforce planning, with internal tools that you have, be it at local level or, workforce planning that is being done at central level, HQ level, and that you then have to apply at local level. Meaning that you could also, say that the upskilling initiative is either an end-to-end process, but it's also, it's also a modular process where you can hook, into the different steps and aspects of it, be it, only matching, be it assessment and matching, be it workforce planning plus assessment and matching, for instance. So here you do see some of these use cases that we do see today around the planet. And one, as I was saying, is the strategic workforce planning piece. We do see also the assessment and matching. So typically this would be upskilling for employed and unemployed. We do see also in the use case 4, for instance, here, a new dynamic. So also using this process and methodology for outskilling purposes, but outskilling in a, social responsibility point of view and perspective. And we do also see, and this is related to, I jump back to the use case 2, which we do actually see in the last weeks, months, is also about remutability analysis of the jobs in your company. So this is also something that we can do with the platform that we have developed, where, specifically now, where people are more and more working remotely, to analyze the remutability of jobs and hence being more prepared for business resilience purposes. But also maybe for new recruitment strategies, as well as if you go really down the streets, let's say also real estate strategies for companies. So how do I manage my real estate based on the presence or non-presence or remote presence of my workforce? So this is all about what you can do with the set of tools that we have developed. And the last one is mainly also directed towards regional governments, for instance, but it could be corporate or it could be also sectorial associations, where we have developed dynamic dashboards around, the evolution of the labor markets and in terms of demand and supply of skills. So let me now just show you, this is to illustrate, let's say, the different pieces and use cases. And you can see here, without going into the details, that this is a topic, in Europe, but also beyond Europe. And I think we have extensively already explained and discussed that we were working, with the PwC network actually across the globe on this topic. So what I would like to do now, and take maybe 10 minutes for that, and then open the floor for questions maybe and discussion, is to actually drive you. And for this, I will just here tell you a bit through the story of Zach, that you know under the name of Christian, that has spoken a bit before, but also John. Take you through the journey of two people that would use the platform that we have developed. So just that you understand a bit how we actually put in music this process that I have talked to you about. So imagine that you have in front of you, Zach, who is an HR director at the headquarters of the company. It could be also locally, it doesn't have to be a headquarter, but at least it has to be a central HR department that has the view, let's say, on the workforce of the company. And Zach is working for a bank that is actually going through a transformation. In this bank, we also have John, who is an employee. He's located in Luxembourg, and he joined the company in 2015 as a loan officer. And his job is currently at risk because of automation of some of the processes within the company. And we would see, in a very sneak preview, how this could look like, and how we accompany these characters, so Zach and John, in their upskilling journey. Zach more from a program management perspective, and John from a very individual perspective around all of this. So if I show you here actually how the platform looks like, you would typically, as Zach, of course, you have to go from the assumption, that there is an offline process. Of course, it's not all taking place online. With this type of upskilling processes, etc., you also have, a full, as I was saying before, human-centered process where you would have also, workshops, etc., to define things, but you have access to the data actually through the platform. So imagine I'm Zach and I'm logging into the platform. I have here, so my future skills assessment platform, where I can see also the various modules that we talked before. And I have also, my dashboards in which I can see what I have to do and where I'm standing actually in my upskilling initiative and program. So the first thing I would do, and I would be interested in as Zach, is actually to go and do a bit of workforce planning to make sure that I can define, my future workforce. And we have a first tool that you see here where you actually are able to identify, how your technology investments would impact your workforce. And to do that, you input data from the company. And these are benchmarks against data that are in the tool and that look at technology adoption rates, but also automation risk of jobs, and what we call also augmentation opportunities on jobs. So where also the interaction between human and machine can also, help to have capacity gains. Last but not least, this platform would also, or this part of the platform would also, enable you to identify new jobs, tech-related jobs, that would typically apply if you implement the technology that you're talking about. And what you can do here is typically, you could go, there are filters, and you could play around, between 1 and 15 years and have a look at the different technologies and how they actually impact your workforce over time. You could also have, a look at the different technology indeed that you want to look at. So this is also based, on the investments that you intend to actually do. From process automation here to collaborative robotics, for instance. And then you have various filters, around organizational units, locations, employee level, but also, others like gender or age, for instance. So this is a very first, let's say, sneak preview in this tool. And what we do there is actually really to, have a look at how is technology impacting your workforce and how does that translate into, the skills and capabilities that you will need in the future. If I come back to the platform, we also use, so this is more like, let's say, an outside-in view and benchmark view on your technology investments and their translation. A second one that we would look at also for the workforce planning is actually to have, and you see here the data points actually that we would use. So anything, it's quite trivial coming out of your HR information system. And what typically you could do with the second view is to have visualization dashboards from these HR data, but most specifically also to have a view, on your internal mobility culture. So for instance, here we are in this bank, and you can see, that there is mobility and there is a mobility culture between departments and historically. So here we do look, at history data. And typically what you would do also is, thanks to questionnaires that I will not show you now, just mindful of time, but thanks to questionnaires here that are decentralized and that you would, spread to the heads of departments of your different departments, you could also, collect data to be able to do this same mobility flows predictions, so for the future actually, and look at, how would actually an upskilling initiative influence your mobility scenarios inside the company, but potentially also outside. As you can see here, inflow and outflow also means, people joining and people leaving the company. So this typically helps to really visualize and think and assess the business transformation scenarios that you have and how they, again, would impact your upskilling initiative and how you can actually also upskill your people. So this is the view at typically, the level of the workforce planning and macro level of the company. And what you would do with that is that the output would typically be then that you identify the jobs that will be impacted and thus also the people sitting on on these jobs, which means that as Zach, also the next step, once I would have identified the jobs, would be typically here, as you can see, to define the participants in my company that would be, you know, impacted and that I would like to send to an upskilling journey. And you can see here, John, for instance, has been identified in his function as loan officer as one of the potential participants. Of course, this is sitting within the platform, and offline, you know, John would have been informed by his HRBP and his manager about the initiative and made sure that he is willing, you know, and motivated to participate. So I finish here with a sneak preview on Zach's journey into the platform and go to John. So you can see here different colors, but John will now, as a participant into the upskilling initiative, then also his journey on the platform. He sees a bit the same, you know, as Zach could also see before, but what you can see here is that he has no tile related to workforce planning, because of course, you know, he is not supposed to, and he doesn't care about the workforce planning of the company, but about his own individual journey. So typically here also John would see, you know, what he needs to do. And you see here that he would need, and he's also already overdue in completing a soft skills assessment. So he would typically go and take his assessments. I do not go into the details here so to spare also time, but typically he would do a soft skills assessment and a job related skills assessment, which would give the platform as inputs a profile, a skills profile, that then he could go and match against a job and a training. And this is the last piece that I want to show you, which is actually here the matching module. So you can see that John here can have a look at, let's say, the job that he could find. So I go here and typically I could be here based on, this is an important point, where are the jobs here coming from? The jobs would typically come from either inside the company, if we're talking, you know, about a corporate and about an internal mobility program. If we're talking about an outplacement program or, you know, mobility across sectors, for instance, or within a sector, but across companies, typically we would scrap the actual job demand on the market. So we would scrap job boards. And what you would see here would typically be the best matches in terms of job demand, so job ads, against John's profile coming out of his assessment that he would have taken into the platform also. And if I take here, you know, one that is the second one here in the list, but that matches with the profile of John, I would then be able to check, you know, between the skills that John is actually here, you know, providing through his assessments, the wanted skills of the job, and let's say the gap in between. So don't take a look at the colors. It's not that green is good and orange is not good. It's just different types of skills that are scanned. And what you can see here is actually on the right-hand side here, you know, everything that is related to the strength and the competencies that John is bringing. And on the left-hand side, the competencies that he's missing. And we can see here one that is most prominent, meaning also that we have gaps here, and that as John, I would typically also want to find training offers that are matching, you know, what I bring and what I need to define, what I need to develop, sorry. So I would typically here I am looking for training have, you know, the gaps that have been identified, and I bring would be the qualifications, competences / strength that John would bring. And if I have a look at the trainings, I then also find, you know, here trainings that would help then John to actually bridge the gap between, you know, the job that he wants to acquire and have as a future job and his current skills. And what we do see maybe as the last piece would be then also to come back to the platform here, if I can, yeah. And I would typically then have, you know, the development plan for John as a training plan, and it would need, of course, to be approved by Zach as the employer of John. Last but not least, the last piece here is that once John has taken the training, he also has the ability to then also rate this training based on what it has brought him. So you see it here. Typically, this is, let's say, the typical journey that one would go through when he goes through his or her upskilling journey. I hope that was not too long and that it could, you know, illustrate a bit more practically also how it can look like, bringing both, you know, the methodology and the technology together. What you could not see here, of course, because we do not have the time for it, is also how, you know, this AI-enabled technology is working. And I think this is also a very important point, that it's not, you know, about matching keywords, etc., but that there are really, you know, algorithms behind that make sure that we take into account, you know, motivational drivers, so the soft skills assessments, technical capabilities of the person in the skills assessment, and that we really try to match it, you know, against the to-be situation, so really the jobs that will be there in the future. With that, I would come back, and also being mindful of time, I would just like to open maybe to some reactions or questions that you might have in the audience, and would be also very keen on hearing what you think actually about this whole upskilling story and how we try to tackle that on our end.
Thanks, Virginie.
Thank you so much, Bob. Actually, all four of you, for your insightful presentations, very interesting slides, and really deep dive into the issue of upskilling and reskilling. Highly appreciated. Maybe if I may be the first brave one to pose a question before we open the floor of this webinar before 2 p.m. we touched upon a little bit about the topic of reskilling and upskilling, also people outside businesses, people who work in the education sector, people employed in public sector, civil servants, and so on and so forth. And Christian, you touched upon that during your time, also speaking about Singapore and other countries, also the story from Luxembourg experience. And maybe a broader question from our perspective, as in MCHEM Slovakia, we are really thoroughly considering how to help our country in terms of upskilling the nationwide population, how to scale all those good opportunities that people in business sector have, and also provide these opportunities to people in public sectors and education areas, and so on and so forth. Any hints, any tips you might have from your Luxembourg story with the minister that could be, I would say, replicated or reused in other countries to, I would say, enforce the understanding that these things are really crucial for further competitiveness of each of the countries?
You mean to give arguments to convince your stakeholders? Is that what you mean?
Precisely. How to ensure that such a conversation might actually take place in most of the countries in Europe, let's say, where the pandemics has unveiled a lot of gaps in skills, I would say, especially in the public sector.
There are many ways to answer that one. There might be a very pragmatic and immediate one. I may forward you a public document, which is a statement which has been made by EU yesterday, which is making reference to OECD guidelines, to SDG of UN guidelines, to regional investments, to all kind of frameworks. In that document, which is a 4 or 5 pages, is only oriented towards upskilling, as in encouraging regions and countries to promote and engage on upskilling. It can't be more direct and clear about on the political side to show that there is a clear request. That's the first thing. So this is more on a political level. Okay. On the pragmatic level, where we see it's very hard to develop such an initiative when you are looking at a very small population. So you need to regroup. The way to regroup is to look at which are the sectors employing the most people, and to have either an association, a region, to take the lead on this one. Of course, there are some criteria that needs to be met. The first criteria is clearly that there needs to be a very big motivation of that body to take the helm and to go for it. The second is that should be eligible, and that body needs to have reach or access to funding, because obviously money is going to be an issue somewhere. So that needs to be worked out.
Money is always an issue.
Indeed, and there is and will be some more EU money, but a participation from the private sector will be mandatory at the end. I mean, there needs to be a split. I mean, don't dream that the state or EU will take it all. What we've been working on in Luxembourg was a share, an equal share between the public and the private sector. And so basically we were looking at kind of a 50-50 deal, where the states / EU would take half of it and companies would take half of it. And that worked perfectly. I think the incentive of already having 50% covered by national or international schemes, I think it's a very great incentive for companies. Already knowing that the scheme is relative on its own already, if private would pay for it all. So it's clearly an incentive. For the states and for universities, clearly we see that actually the competencies of civil servants start to be a blocker for many countries, because if they are not skilled enough to accompany all the movements we are in today, they just don't understand the topic, and they are kind of blocking without even willing, because they just don't understand what you are talking about. So there is kind of a mandatory movement to reskill civil servants in most countries. There are some actions which are already taken in some of them. The most advanced are already kind of busy. I give you an example. I will take again Singapore, because I'm working a lot with those guys. They have 140,000 civil servants. They need to upskill 40,000 of them in the next 3 years. That's already decided. So they know that if they don't do it, they're dead. And by the way, their jobs will change. You know, they've been investing billions in automatization, in digital technology. So most of the jobs will change also in the public services. So they have no choice but to upskill their civil servant, and they will. So that's a clear point. The last thing is, there is usually everything it takes to make it happen. The problem is people don't know where to find it. So what you could usefully do, and I know it's kind of a very, people just don't know it exists. At EU level, there is the DG the reform, okay, which job is precisely to support bodies who are looking for desperately in making things working, to realign all the processes and to make sure that all the funding available are really made available. But the initiative, which is a little bit counterintuitive, needs to come from the region or the state. So basically your state or your regions needs to call upon DG reform to say, hey, we'd like to run a nationwide or regional upskill initiative. Can you help us align all those EU instruments, because basically we're lost, okay? And by the way, it's their job to do so. And they know they have to do it, and they are volunteering to do so. So that's maybe a very pragmatic tip, because I know that in the jungle of EU support mechanism, it's so complicated that everybody is lost. And it ends up usually that there are billions which are unused, because basically people just don't know how to use them. But there is a mechanism which is to call upon the DG reform.
So for instance, the project that Ivan has showed the results, I know from Martin and Ivan that this is a project that has been funded under this framework. Maybe Martin, you can say a word about this. And another story is also, you know, how, because of course money is always, you know, the topic. How do you fund such an initiative? Beyond also the funds by the EU on structural reforms, etc., there is also the possibility, and it already exists, to have loans. So the European Investment Bank, for instance, has a skills fund, so specifically dedicated to skills development, that corporates in Europe can actually mobilize to pre-finance such initiatives. So I think it's indeed about all being aware, you know, where to find the money to make it happen, let's say.
Thank you very much. And also, given the time that we are also running a couple of minutes after time, I guess if you have some more minutes to spare, we still have open floor for questions from our participants. So feel free to unmute yourself. Feel free to turn on your camera and raise a question to our speakers. Or use the chat function if you prefer to write it down. Last call for a question, for opportunity to ask. Well, I guess everything was crystal clear.
Yeah. What I may add, maybe if any one of you wishes to dive more into this and wants or wishes a private demo, I think you can clearly reach out to Martin or to our I mean, of course, Slovak colleagues, and they will organize it for you, and we'll make a pleasure to do it. This solution is currently discussed and implemented in more than 20 different countries, in many different languages. So don't be shy to just ask. I know some of you are also subsidiaries of international groups. It could be also of interest to your headquarters. We're happy to do so if you think it's of interest for you. We're also, of course, engaging with major big corporates, because at corporate level, sometimes it just makes sense to do it for your own. So again, a free call, don't be shy. We're happy to help and support. And I know it's a complex topic, but we also know it's a very critical topic, because we strongly believe that the fuel of the 21st century is not only data, it's also brains. And we know that those brains need to be fed, not only with a lot of technical things, but they need to be also well aligned with the purpose we have. They need to have all those soft skills, which we need to develop together with them. And that's not going to be coming spontaneously to people. So we need to work on this, but there is a big benefit in doing so.
Absolutely. I would just add to that as a last comment from my side, the recording will be available shortly in a couple of days for our members to be seen on MCHAM webpage. So also there will be also a chance to get back to everything what we have discussed and to do any potential follow-ups that might come out of this webinar. Having said that, thank you very much all for our speakers, especially Virginie, Christian, Martin, Ivan. Thank you for your engagement. Also thanks to Claire for your technical support, and Zuzana of MCHAM team for making sure that everything has worked correctly, and looking forward to our future cooperation. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.